Welcome to Growth Colony, Australia's B2B podcast. I'm Alex from Xgrowth. Each episode, we bring you B2B founders, CMOs, marketing and sales leaders to find out what makes them successful and what was behind their failures. Or as we like to call them, hard-learned lessons. If you enjoy the episode, please consider giving us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and share the pod with a friend you think could get value out of it. And of course, make sure to join the community Slack channel at growthcolony.org/Slack. That's enough from me though, let's dive right in.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode. I'm Shahin Hoda with Xgrowth, and today I'm talking to Hayley Hopwood, Head of Growth, Australia and New Zealand at Stripe, about her experience building a sales development team at Stripe, the do's and don'ts and the lessons that she and her team learned throughout that journey. Hayley, thanks for joining us.
No, thank you.
No, it's great to have you. I'm really excited to talk about this. This is definitely a area of passion for me as well. Now, I know at Stripe you call the team that you're building, or we're talking about OBAs, right? Can you tell us what OBA stands for and what it is?
Yeah, sure. So it's relatively new, and the OBA role is an outbound associate. So basically, we deem them or that team the pre-sales growth engine of sales. So they're really responsible for sourcing data and segmenting it into certain campaigns or bespoke messaging to go out and look for prospects. So it's a pure hunting role, and the intent is for that sort of early stage funnel management piece, so converting leads into opportunities that then get passed over to the AEs, which is our sales team, to then validate and close out.
Interesting. So they have the responsibility of both sourcing and also going after them and trying to open up those doors. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. I mean, why did you develop this role in the first place? Like, what happened in the organization that this became a focus and an area of development?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. Like, firstly, we're moving into like a mindset of outbounding is really the calisthenics of Stripe. So, when I think back to when we first landed in Australia, Stripe came around 7 years ago, and it was purely inbound. And it was a small team that's rapidly expanding at the moment. But the channel was always really strong for inbound. We really serve a diverse, like coming into the organization 18 months ago, it really struck me at the diversity of businesses that we bring on board. So anything from, your B2C business right through to sort of SaaS platforms and enterprises serving B2C or B2B, wholesalers, marketplaces, sort of startups as well, which is our bread and butter, that transform and head into hypergrowth that end up in enterprise land. So, when I joined, we sort of reviewed this inbound channel, and we could see some of Australia's largest household brands, coming and finding us. So it sort of just got us thinking, well, what could we achieve if we actually had a targeted strategy and focused on certain segments? And that was about 18 months ago. So yeah, we just thought it was time.
Right. Okay. I love it. Well, why do you call it the calisthenics of Stripe?
I think it's just a muscle that just needs constant exercising. You can do an array of things within your sales profession, but the one thing that will always hold you in good stead is that outbounding piece, and just really nurturing it and developing it and constantly being aware of how to iterate on it is probably one of the most fundamental parts of any sales professional.
I love it. Okay. Let's talk about hiring, because I feel like the whole outbound and kind of sales development role is probably not as developed here in Australia as it is maybe in the US, where outbound work has been going on for a long time. I mean, there has been some work in Australia as well, but maybe not as sophisticated or structured as it is in the US, right? So I think a lot of people have hard time hiring for these roles and who to look for and what kind of characteristics they should look for, because it's hard to say, all right, you were an SDR there, we're trying to hire an SDR as well. And in some cases that's possible, but still because I feel like because the market is maturing, that level of easy identification is not there. What do you look for when you're trying to hire someone for an OBA role?
Firstly, it's really interesting that you highlight that, because when we were looking for our initial candidate, it took us months. There was just, and we had a really strict set of criteria that we were looking for because it was a net new role. But now, fast forwarding 18 months, I've noticed that the pool of people that have come in are really still quite experienced in some regards, but there's a lot more of them. So yeah, back 18 months ago, we were looking for someone that had experience, someone who presented with super high prospecting confidence and had that sort of mindset of, targets, numbers, and really performance driven, which is fine. That they're sort of attributes that you would expect in that role. But because it was net new, we were really hoping to find someone that could help us build out that strategy and that framework piece. So, sort of asking a lot from a candidate. Yeah, so I think it took us a long time to find that person. So we kind of changed the way that we interviewed when we were looking to hire, and we conducted around 6 different interviews. And that was across the range of the business, so across all of APAC, from, a couple of leaders right through to other AEs. So we could really get a different viewpoint on the characteristics that we were trying to find. So, how was their pitch? What was their critical thinking and analytical thinking style like? What sort of sales instincts did they just have as a part of their DNA? Did they have any technical capabilities? And also just holistically, how would they approach this role? And we still have that interview process today. So it's still, quite intense for any candidates to, be interviewed at Stripe. It takes a long period of time. But given the diversity of the people that were doing that interview, it really created this collaborative approach when we all got back together to discuss that candidate's strengths and weaknesses. So, from a hiring manager's perspective, I was able to look for consistencies within the other interviews and also patterns in behaviour. So it was really fundamental for me to make that decision based on everyone else's sort of calibration. It's really important to get this right, particularly seeing it was a net new hire for me. So yeah, we've since gone on to employ the first OBA has moved into a sales role, and we've since gone on to hire another 3 OBAs as well. So whilst that interview process has remained, I think the diversity of people that are coming through the door just even 18 months later has been significant.
All right, I see. Are there past experiences that right now really grabs your attention? Like, you're talking to someone and you see something in their resume and you're like, I really want to have a chat to this person. This could potentially be a really good candidate. Are there like these quick tips that you've come across?
Look, I look for probably tech backgrounds as well, like that fast moving environment that Stripe moves at a mega speed. So just being able to live and breathe in that space comfortably without sort of being stressed, I kind of look out for. Also, when I am interviewing, not so necessarily on a CV, I look for like organizational skills. For the OBA, there's just so much diversity within the role, sort of pre-building out campaigns, the calisthenics, so actually doing the outbounding and then following it up, and, just being really transparent with yourself and being able to articulate quickly, what's worked, what hasn't, what do I need to do more or less of. And I think that comes with a lot of time management. So, I really look out for someone who's able to prioritize and manage their time accordingly for this role.
Got it. All right. You mentioned what, you wanted to have a look and for them to understand what's working, what's not working, which kind of is a great segue to the next question. Trying to build the OBA team. Tell us a little bit about some of the mistakes that you and the team have made in the early months.
I think it goes back to your point where it's more established in other regions. So being a global org, we kind of just relied on the global data and made that assumption that it would work well in Australia and New Zealand. So I think we spent a bit of time just reassessing what that truly looked like and how clean the data was for Australia and how purposeful it was. So in those first couple of months, it was really around sourcing the tools that we needed in Australia to actually sort of get that information. It's all about the pre-work with the OBA role, about building those campaigns, finding the right people. And I think we underestimated the time that would take. It's still a work in progress today. I don't think any business has it nailed down, but at least it's working at a much more optimal speed. And I think the other thing, and we sort of have a saying at Stripe where we kind of fly the plane whilst we're building it. So going back to the actual outbounding piece, it's like, how do we follow up and how do we automate that process so it's just not as labor intensive as what it has been in the past. So it's really about what sort of touch points do we want? Five touch points, 7 touch points. How are we going to engage? Is it via telephone, LinkedIn? Is it a short video message that we're getting a lot of traction with now that resonates with individuals? And really building out that data set around personas, like who are you targeting? Is the messaging going to resonate with them? If it's a CFO, it needs to be sort of financial driven. If it's the CTO, what tech stack is going to resonate with them and how is it going to add value? It's having those sort of pieces, and it's all that pre-work that really goes into, the fundamentals of getting everything right. And I think that, just rolling that out just for any organization just takes time. The other thing I think, as we sort of, a couple of quarters in, was really around, you can't monitor if you can't measure if you can't monitor. So it was like integrating those tools back into our CRM to make sure that, the salespeople could actually see what the OBAs are doing. And, that's getting reiterated upon as well. And I think the last call out I would say, and it's not necessarily a mistake, but it's something that we just had to be really mindful of, given the kind of caliber of people that we employ, is what does the target look like? And we didn't know what we didn't know, when we rolled this out 18 months ago. So rather than having, the longevity of a target that a normal sales cycle would have, it was like, okay, quarterly we'll set goals to work out, what kind of lead numbers that we could get, what was that pipeline value look like, and I guess, what is the expectation depending on where that person sort of sits within the organization, is a realistic target. I think that takes time to work out too.
Yeah, those are all very interesting points. I want to dig into all of them. So, the data one is really interesting because most of the, a lot of the information or kind of best practices that we get are either North American or coming from UK, where, just like you said, there's a plethora of tools and, data, how do you get emails, how do you, dig up information on a potential prospect. A lot of that is available there. And when you come to Australia, and if somebody has that experience and is gonna, make that recommendation for Australia, it's all of a sudden like, no, we don't have that. That's not available here. Do you think that's gonna stay as a responsibility of OBAs? The reason I ask is sometimes I've seen that responsibility is separated, where one team is responsible for really finding and digging through data and finding the right one. And then there is one that is kind of responsible for outreach and outbound so that they kind of keep that momentum up and it doesn't get diluted by, okay, now I have to sit down and for another 2 days, just dig up information. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, and it depends on where the OBA is positioned. So, sort of as I mentioned before, we're breaking it out into, we've got 3 OBAs in 18 months. And, one is focused on sort of that startup SMB community, which is more around sort of that campaign managing. We need to have the data enriched by sales ops, like somebody else, to be able to get long lists where we can, we can go to the masses. As we sort of go into our digital native space, which is businesses that are born in the cloud and have a natural affiliation to Stripe, and then also enterprise, it's more that bespoke messaging. It's more tailored. It's more one-on-one work with an AE to work out, okay, what industries are we wanting to go after? What's that key messaging? Who should we target? And multiple stakeholders within the account. So To a certain degree, I think a lot of the data should sit within sort of the sales operations and data science to clean it and cleanse it and make sure that it's all there. But then at a tactical level, if you're going for that more bespoke messaging, it needs to be done in conjunction with a sales rep to actually understand the nuances and where the messaging is going to resonate. I don't think you can rely on data science to give you that depth that you need to win those sort of larger businesses.
Got it. So as you kind of go up market, you start to put more of that emphasis on the OBA and the sales team rather than external party providing that. And external could be also within the organization, but outside of the sales team. Right. Let's touch on cadence. I mean, you talked about video working a lot right now. Tell me a little bit about that.
I know. The OBA that we've just recently employed gave me a video message for the interview for the role, and it worked. Yeah, we're finding a lot of traction through short video messaging via LinkedIn. So really personalized, 30 seconds, if that, messaging around what Stripe can do to help certain businesses, whether it be a news article that we've aligned it to, or whether we know that we're just a really, really sound fit. We're finding that strike rate from video messaging, be really valuable. Like really.
Oh, and that is used in conjunction with LinkedIn. Is that right? Like through a personal message on LinkedIn. What about through email? Is that something that you or not really?
Through email as well, but we're seeing a bit more traction come through LinkedIn. So yes, it can be done either way, but at the moment we're seeing probably more results coming through LinkedIn. Even a decline response is, sometimes you tend to just get crickets. That's not foreign to anyone in an OBA role, where with the video messaging, it's like, love the video, now's not a good time, or, whatever. The results are, really sound, even if it's a thank you, but not now.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's just so refreshing compared to, especially on LinkedIn, compared to all the messages that you get, all the automated bot messages that you get that, hey, we're a development company in India and we're trying to sell you something, or we're a lead generation organization and we can get you leads for those, and then there you go in a sequence and you look at it and you're like, yeah, I'm totally, this is totally automated, versus a bespoke message that you even say the person's name in there and they're like, really? You made that for me? No, I love that. I love that.
It's really good.
You talked about targeting as the third or the last component that you mentioned, in terms of, sorry, not targeting, but what is the target of the sales team, right? And how per quarter, whether it's remuneration per quarter, whether it's the numbers that you're looking at, what are some of the advice that you'd have for someone who is trying to figure out how do I put the commission structure in place for a sales development or an OBA role? Do you have any advice on that front?
Yeah, I think as we sort of go, as we sort of segment our teams and the OBAs will follow, I think it's been really insightful to actually dig a bit deeper into all of those different areas. So for someone who's working in startups and in SMB, the pipeline volume might not be as great, but they might have a better strike rate for creating leads into opportunities. So therefore, that has to be taken into consideration when you're getting your target attainment. So it might be, much more a higher SQOs, or what we call sales generated leads, as opposed to a lower pipeline value. But when you move uptown into enterprise, we find that that's a lot lower. So it's been really hard having just the one OBA for the 18 months to work out, okay, well, what's that threshold, and how much time are you going to be spending in this segment as opposed to that segment? So it's being really thoughtful in that approach. I think also, if you're wanting to tier, I think when you get into sort of more mid-market and enterprise, tiering works. Like what's the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 strategy. And you can align sort of the SQOs along, the tiering system as well. So I think that creates a little bit more clarity around target setting, because, to land a tier 1 is going to take a lot longer, but it's going to be a much greater pipeline value than a tier 3 business. They could be in the same industry. It's just that, they're more nimble and they're able to move at a faster pace. So it's being able to take those things into consideration. I think 18 months ago, we weren't there. So it was just sort of like let's just trial this and see. And that's what we've sort of done. But now that we've had 18 months, a couple of quarters under our belt, we can actually go, okay, this makes more sense if we actually, really segment the OBAs and then put that tiering system in place.
I love that. So it's not as much. So the key takeaway is that it really depends what kind of company you're going after and the size of the company and the complexity of the deal. But also, it's not like you would turn to an OBA and be like, okay, if you land these kind of clients, this is what you're going to get. If you land these kinds, this is what you're going to get. I feel like that just confuses the OBA a little bit and brings a level of complexity. And they'll probably go after the ones that they're best at because they feel like they can get the most commission out of that.
And I mean, that's the other thing. I think with anything like a hybrid role, like if you're having partial, campaign management and then also the sort of bespoke side, people are going to migrate to what they feel most comfortable or what they get enjoyment out of. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to result in numbers. If you've got a high SQO number, just say 20, but you're targeting the top end of town and might get 4, you might be over indexed on pipeline value, but under indexed on leads created. So it's I think aligning the individual's skill set to wherever they're going to succeed as well is really imperative as a leader.
Love that. Okay. The last thing that I wanted to touch on was around, what does the career progression of an OBA look like at Stripe?
Yeah, the types of people that we've employed for the role, and even globally, because we're sort of at the infancy stages, is really strong. They come in with that. Normally, it's just straight out of uni or first or second role within an organization, and they're really wanting to build into that AE full end-to-end sales sort of role. So traditionally, we find the OBAs upon joining have already set their career path of their next step, and we strongly encourage having career conversations every 6 months. And majority of them lean into like that, the sales role. So going into a closing position, and which is great for us as well, because we're sort of building out what that model looks like. Because and we've done it once here in Australia, where an OBA has moved into an AE role, and we see like the pipeline traction upwards of 30% in comparison to someone that we've employed as a junior stepping into an AE role. So, their cadence around creating deals and signing deals is much greater because they've got experience within Stripe under their belt, but also they've got that familiarity of what it takes to get deals done up, and then you can sort of train the rest of that the closing experience as well. So we find that a lot of the OBAs come in with that mindset of, I'm here because I want to learn and I want to take that next leap into a closing AE role.
Yeah, I love that. This is a question that I get quite a lot, where especially smaller organizations who are trying to maybe do their first sales hire. And when we have a chat, I always say, go for a sales development rep rather than an account executive or the equivalent in your industry, where, an account executive could be a very expensive hire. But just like you said, when you do that SDR hire, you can train them up and then they can replace you. You probably, if you're a business owner, you can probably close right now. You don't have time to prospect, and they can kind of feed you those opportunities and you close. And then gradually you kind of promote them and it's a much better fit, and they have a lot more context, just like you said, about the business. I love that. Now, Hayley, I have a couple of rapid questions that I want to ask, but before we get to the rapid questions, is there anything else that you think it will be valuable for people who are listening for us to discuss with regards to the OBA role and everything else that we discussed that I didn't ask?
Yeah, I think for me, the role, like we've learned a lot over the last 18 months and we're starting to get really into that rhythm. And as you sort of say, like for new businesses, I think it's imperative to get that messaging out and then the rest will follow. So you can sort of, train and develop individuals as they go through their career. But I think for the OBA, I think the pillars for me around success are really around that pre-work. So who are we targeting and why? I think helps with that success rate. And then, the outbounding piece. So the calisthenics, always working that muscle. And then, for me, I think, I touched on it before, it's just like measuring those trends and finding the right individuals that are transparent and honest enough to actually go to own that experience, because you need that to just reiterate and continually improve. And that's kind of what's held us in good stead over the last 18 months. Is having
Got it. Mm-hmm. That actually brings up a question that I like to ask. How do you set up an OBA? How do you set up an OBA up for success? If you're trying to hire, if you're a manager, what do you need to do before hiring an OBA in order for them to be successful once you do hire them?
And I think that this was the challenging part at the start, right? Because we didn't know what we didn't know. So that's why we were looking for someone with that next level of experience to help build out that framework. So it's just having someone that is kind of gritty enough and able to pivot when needed to do a multitude of things. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're just going to be focused on that OBA. We're getting to that stage where we're having that laser focused on those three different areas of the business. But, back at its infancy, we needed someone to be able to sort of bend with the requirements of what we needed to make it work. And for me, it was just instilling that trust and motivation and getting things unblocked. So whether it was the data that needed to be cleaned, how do we go about that? What other tools do we need? So it was just sort of like, as I sort of mentioned before, it was just like, well, flying the plane and building it as well. So we needed someone that was able to sort of roll with those punches.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because I think you're right. There's a lot that changes in that period, and there's a lot that could be related to that person's commission structure as well. So now you're all of a sudden playing with someone's livelihood. It becomes a lot more sensitive. So that's a really good point of making sure that you set that expectation in advance, and even if their compensation, you need to have to think about the compensation, have that earlier, rather than when they jump in the role and you're like, hey, this was the target. Oh crap, we can't do that. Now we're gonna change your target, and the approach is gonna be different. And then their question is gonna be like, so what's gonna happen to my commission structure? Because based on the previous model, now you're telling me I'm gonna get paid, I don't know, 20% less.
And I think it's, as an organization, you need to have that flexibility as well. I mean, we didn't necessarily have it in my experience, but if the data wasn't as good, I mean, it wasn't good, but if it was really poor, then what did that mean? Like 50% of my time I was spent just cleaning data rather than actually outbounding. So, that has a negative impact to my livelihood. So, it's being able to measure and monitor and have those transparent conversations, I think. Otherwise, you just don't retain staff. If you're not having those transparent conversation, it just ends up, making for a disgruntled employee, which no one wants.
Yeah, frustrated and then out the door. Absolutely. Okay, let's do some rapid questions. I got a couple of rapid questions that I want to go through with you. The first one is, what is one resource? It could be a book, it could be a blog, podcast, a talk, whatever it is that fundamentally has changed the way you work or live.
Yeah, I always go back to a book, Dare to Lead. I don't know if you know it, by Brene Brown. So choosing courage over comfort. I always find that I like to present as a very authentic leader, but, it's always good to be reminded that it's okay to be vulnerable. Like, I don't have all of the answers. I think I've demonstrated that today, but I'm curious. I have a passion for continued learning, and I like to, demonstrate that in my leadership style. So if I ever feel like I, am losing some of that just due to being so busy, I like to refer back to that book. Going back on a resource that I like to give OBAs and for my new AEs, so the new sales team, is a book called Eat That Frog, which is by Brian Tracy. You're nodding, I think you might know it. So it's that procrastination piece, and it's disciplining yourself to do the worst thing first thing every morning. And then over a period of time, it just starts to habituate into your behavior. So you're not just sitting there wasting time thinking about what you should be doing. It's actually just, eating that dirtiest, biggest, ugliest frog first and getting on with your day. That I encourage my OBAs and the newcomers to read.
Yeah, those are both really great resources. I love it. Okay, question number 2. If you could only give one advice to salespeople, OBAs, people in the sales space, what would it be?
Given that we've just spent the last 20 minutes talking about outbounding, I would say keep your pipeline full. The rest will look after itself. You touched on it with small businesses as well. If you're going to employ someone who can actually keep the momentum going, keep that pipeline full. You'll be able to close out that business and move on. So it's just all around creating leads and closing out opportunities.
Yeah, have as many balls in the air as you can, right? Yeah, productivity. What was that? Productively, did you say?
Yeah, productivity and prioritizing.
Absolutely. Okay. What are some of the influencers that you follow in the sales space?
I think in the sales space, it would be Kyle Porter. I think he's the CEO of Sales Loft, changing the way that we really engage with people individually. And I think that that's changed over the last, 5 years. And it's about, selling with authenticity, which is key to me. Yeah. So I really sort of like following him. And also Aaron Ross, he's written a couple of books, but I think he's really considered in his sales approach, particularly going back to today's environment where, our prospects and our buyers have so much information at their fingertips with the internet. It's just like, how do we change and bring that information into our mold and into the way that we sell, I think is really imperative to the way that it's, you succeed at sales these days.
All right. Last thing that I wanted to ask you is, what is something that excites you about the B2B space as a whole today?
It has to be technology and payments, obviously, two of my prized passions. And, I look back, and we're going through it now again, unfortunately, but, I look back at when COVID started and Stripe in Australia and New Zealand onboarded 10,000 new users. And that was really that was an intense time for the team, an intense time for businesses. So if I look back at the kind of businesses that were reaching out to us, it was really around telehealth. So businesses that, I'm still consulting virtually now, but I have no way, shape or form of taking a payment. Like I'm doing it all for free. Or, you're looking at businesses that, butchery or your fruit and veg shop, which is like, I've got these perishable items. How do I sell them and deliver them safely in a COVID environment? So all of that was powered through technology. So I think that the way that platforms are speaking to platforms, and it's been underpinned by payments and using payments as a commodity, is really exciting. It's changing the way that consumers behave and buy, and it's also changing the way businesses interact with one another. So for me, I think what excites me about B2B is, I guess it's the payments infrastructure, but it's also just technology led. It's really an exciting time.
No, it's fascinating how one technology could so drastically change a business model and approach of a company. That's a great point. Hayley, I really appreciate you jumping on the podcast. This has been a great conversation. I really enjoyed every bit of it. I think there's a lot of insights for the listeners to take away. I think there's a lot of people out there who are looking at building a sales development team or an outbound sales team. So I think there is going to be a lot of golden nuggets in here for them to dig through and listen to. Thank you so much for joining us.
No, thanks for having me, and I hope you found it insightful.
Thanks so much for joining us on this episode. If you enjoyed it, please consider leaving us that 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and sharing the pod with a friend. If you'd like to continue the conversation, please make sure to join the community Slack channel at growthcolony.org/Slack. growthcolony.org/Slack. Thanks again for all the support, and we're looking forward to seeing you again in the next one.